When it comes to the question of a generalist versus a specialist, the world seems to be very divided. And in the world of business and research and education, there is an ongoing struggle, almost you could say for dominance, between these two approaches. Today's world is highly specialized. There are niches which require one's full attention, can be their entire livelihood simply to even attempt to comprehend or work with some small but important subset of information. Think like a very niche technology or research in a rare disease. Without these specialists, the argument goes, no one would have the information necessary to solve certain problems or to come up with certain solutions. No one has the time to be a master of all trades. Others say that specialists, especially when they have focused so much into a niche, will miss the bigger picture. That changes in an industry of information, of the needs of the population. An expert who has spent their life in this subdomain will be left behind. That real solutions come from a broader understanding. Both of these points have merit. Both of these approaches, that of the generalist and that of the specialist, are needed today. Humans are naturally competitive, and this goes as much for the world of knowledge as any other part of the human experience. We often work hard to acquire our information, and not only to acquire it, but to be recognized for having that information. We work hard in our careers to be recognized. We get degrees, sometimes advanced degrees, which certify, or should certify, that we know a certain category of information, that we know it well, perhaps better than others, that we are an expert there. And there's merit to that. It allows others to recognize a bit more clearly from where information should be legitimately derived, who can be trusted, ideally, with the answers to certain questions. But this leads to a kind of siloing and isolation, not only from the inside, where those who work in the particular niche do not stray outside, do not gain insights from outside their own narrow focus, but also prevents others from coming to the inside. People who might be able to aid, to assist, to participate are excluded simply for not having the merit of being already recognized for that field. And once again, there's some reason for this, in that many people do attempt to offer unsolicited information about topics that they don't really comprehend. We all feel smart and we all want to help, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are always helpful. There is an old story about the painter Apelles, who was painting a portrait, and he had a cobbler, a shoemaker, who gave him information and advice about how to render the feet to look realistic in his portrait. But then the cobbler went on to give information about the ankles and the legs, and so on, moving up. And Apelles said, "Sutor ne ultra crepidam," cobbler, not beyond the shoes. That is, the painter looked for information from an expert on the field in which he was an expert. But once he strayed outside his field of expertise, the cobbler's information on the other areas of the body that the painter was attempting to paint became much less valuable. We must recognize our own limits and the relative value, or lack thereof, of the information as it relates to what we do or do not know. But who is really the best judge of that? We can certainly fool ourselves into thinking we know more than we do or less than we do. Others can also be easily misled about our own merits. We're inclined to believe that we know certain things because we feel like we know certain things. We feel like we're smart, intelligent people. We feel like we're educated on a topic. Sometimes, though, we feel intimidated by a topic and think that we know less than we do. Those around us, seeing us only in certain capacities, expect that we know one thing but not another. They might expect the topic we have a degree in, or the field that we work in, is something that is our expertise, whereas something else is not. And maybe this is accurate, and maybe it's not. Somewhere in between the image we have of our own knowledge and the image that others have of our knowledge lies the truth of what we do know. But in a practical sense, we have to put to use what we know and determine as best we can what that is, so we can have a certain level of recognition of what the extent of our knowledge is on a topic, how much there is left to learn, and how much we can assume we do know. It's a challenge, but a very worthwhile challenge, to keep an eye on what we know and have an accurate gauge. Let's say you're helping a friend build a fence on his property. You have some woodworking experience and you feel like you can contribute. Your friend has done work around the house and feels also like he is equipped for this task. But you both don't know quite how much each other knows, and you don't know how far to trust one another. How do you recognize how much you know, whether your experience building your dining room table prepared you to build a fence, whether your neighbor's work around the house gave him the insights he would need to transfer to something of this sort? How much effort should you both go through to learn more about constructing a fence? How much can you rely on what you already know? In day-to-day life, we sometimes have to make these assumptions and just go for it. We don't necessarily have the time to do all the research we would want, and our egos don't necessarily allow us to dig in depth on topics we feel we should already be able to handle. And so we as specialists, to a degree, sometimes treat ourselves as generalists when perhaps we're not as generalist as we'd like to think. But at the same time, it's better to think of ourselves as multi-talented than to restrict ourselves unnecessarily. There does not need to be a stark line that divides generalist and specialist. We all have some things we know a bit better than others. There will always be some things that others know better than we do. Some people are better at mastering a number of skills, others at learning particular things in depth. The challenge for the future will be to integrate these, to validly and honestly comprehend what we bring to the table and what others bring to the table, viewing these things not as a reflection of the value of the person, but simply what they are equipped to contribute at that time and in that context. And that's very tricky because it's so easy to underestimate or overestimate yourself or another person, and there are issues of ego and of history and of seniority and all those things. And it makes it a very difficult task. But it's also very important. We do our best work only when we correctly recognize the various values. And these can change over time. No one is stuck knowing exactly what they know right now. And two very similar ventures can differ in subtle ways that will potentially have one person contributing only a little bit to one and a lot more to another, even if they're in a similar domain. Being able to recognize these differences, these gradations, and learn to interact effectively will be a major boon in the future. And I think this is a particular opportunity of note where no individual, no organization, no tool has yet really fit the gap. Being able to consolidate generalist and specialist effectively into a group based not on wishful thinking but on reality and personality and background. Allowing teams and working groups to form based on these natural meshings. We have all sorts of personality tests and work compatibility tests and proficiency tests, but none of these really effectively capture how people work well together in reality, nor what they bring to the table for a particular project or group of projects. But there's a very clear opening here for any kind of insight into how we can gauge the general or specific level of knowledge of a group of people and connect them in such a way that the generalist and the specialist of varying percentages can work efficiently together. I doubt it would be one breakthrough. It's likely to be something that changes and grows over time, but the opportunity there is tremendous. As we move into and beyond knowledge work, the ability to integrate not only information but people will become one of the most critical aspects of work in the future.